Okay, well, the room continues to fill up, but it looks like people are able to connect well. And I know that there's a lot of information that we'd like to cover in the next hour, so I think we are ready to begin. My name is Sarah Maslin-Fothery, and I'm the Director of Parent Relations here at Dickinson. And it's wonderful to see that so many first year and sophomore families have joined us tonight. And I just want to say how much we appreciate you making this presentation a priority for you and for your family. Also, thank you to many of you who submitted your questions for our panelists in advance of this session. We know that these past 8 months have been challenging and have affected your families in so many unique ways. And we appreciate how much you care about Dickinson and your students' experience during this time. All of your questions and submissions of feedback that we received from parents and students and other members of the community have all been reviewed and have been given great consideration. And tonight, we'll use our time together to respond to the questions that had been submitted in advance. But if there are some that remain, please feel free to use the Q&A feature and we'll address those as we're able. Now, logistics aside for this evening, one more point is that this presentation will be recorded and it will be available after, should you wish to reference it after we conclude our time together. But as we begin tonight, I am thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce you to Dickinson's 29th president, Dr. Margie Ensign. Margie's steadfast and confident leadership during these difficult times has really been an inspiration. Her deliberate and thoughtful decision-making has allowed us to remain not only stable, but very strong and positioned well to support your students in any environment. And right now, I'm pleased to turn the session over to her for further introductions of the college's staff members who've joined us tonight and for her own remarks. So thank you, President Ensign.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Good evening and welcome everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your comments, Sarah, but no decisions are ever made alone. We have an extraordinary senior staff at Dickinson, and I think almost all of them are on the webinar with me tonight. So let me quickly introduce them. First, Neil Weissman, Provost and Dean of the College. Neil wave so everybody can see you. George Stroud, Vice President for Student Life, Dean of Students. Bronte Burley-Jones, Vice President for Finance and Administration. Don Dominici, Executive Director of Dickinson's Wellness Center, also with us, but not on video. Our Kathy Davenport, our Vice President for Enrollment and Dean of Admissions. Karen Ferniak, my Chief of Staff. Kendall Isaac, our General Counsel, and Connie McNamara, our Vice President for Marketing and Communications. We're all here to answer your questions. Let me just begin by thanking you, as Sarah said, for being Dickinsonians during this extraordinarily challenging moment. It is for everyone, and you know, our hearts go out to you and your families, and we certainly wish we were all together on this campus. I think there's nothing sadder than an empty campus, and while we've got about 160 students, I wish it were filled with all of you sitting on those red chairs and getting to know each other and your incredible faculty members. But we've had to make some hard decisions at Dickinson, as people have around the country. Our decisions have always been based on, first of all, health and safety and how we could bring students back in a way that would do our very best to protect you and manage you during this very difficult moment. Before I begin, this difficult moment, I think, has an ending in sight. It's over the horizon. It's not immediate. We're all really encouraged by the news of these two now vaccines. And our best indication, some of you have asked, is that it would be late spring or early summer before most of us would have access to them. But I think the end is in sight. So I ask you to stay strong. You have submitted many questions, about 7 pages of questions. And so we're going to try to answer as many as we can. We've grouped them into themes, and the ones that we can't answer tonight, we will either get back to you individually. Our answers will also be rolled into our FAQs that are on our homepage. If you have specific questions as we're talking, you can use the chat function and we'll do our very best to answer those. So I'm going to take a group of questions, and this is how I've grouped them. Why? Why did we make this decision to bring back half at a time? What has changed since the fall that would allow us to do that? Why can't we all be together, as some colleges have attempted this fall? How are we dealing with the community? Will students be restricted on campus? And could the January decision change? So why this decision and what's changed since the fall? When we had to go fully remote in the fall, there were two things that were not in place, actually three things. One was reliable and rapid testing. Second was contact tracing. Third was our conduct code, which is now ready. And fourth was a relationship with the community where we could ensure to the greatest extent your safety. I am thrilled, as we all are on this campus, that we have been able to develop a relationship with probably the best testing group in the country, the Broad Institute at Harvard and its affiliates. So we are now ready to purchase tests that would be given twice a week to our students. I was on a call recently with college presidents, and this statistic was cited. Only 6% of colleges in the universities and colleges in the US are testing once a week. We will be testing twice a week. The second thing that must be in place in order for us to operate safely is the contact tracing. In the fall, the state hadn't moved into this area. They now have. 1,000 contact tracers have been hired, and they've also established a digital app that's extremely useful and that we will use. As our Vice President Stroud can tell you, our compact is in place. To have anyone on this campus, of course, we all have to follow ethical and behavior that watches out for each other and take personal responsibility for wearing a mask and doing that social distancing. Another piece that's often overlooked is the community that you're in. And while some college presidents that I'm working with have been able to restrict students on their campus, we could never do that at Dickinson, nor would we want to. As you know, we open up into our wonderful community of Carlisle. You leave our gates and you're literally downtown. So tomorrow, actually, we're launching a public health initiative with over 120 businesses, restaurants in our community, where we'll be passing out 4,000 masks. Students will know which businesses are safe to go into because they'll have a Carlisle Can poster in the window. So we are doing everything we can to make this campus as safe as possible. We couldn't bring all of you back. I've said that health and safety were our priority. We have to save rooms for quarantining. We have to be sure to provide single rooms to those who want them. It simply would not be safe to have our entire student body back at this time. And that's why we made the decision, knowing we wanted all of you to have an opportunity to be on campus, to begin with first and second year students. I know some of you first year students have never seen our beautiful campus, have not seen our community, have not met us firsthand. We can't wait for that to happen. So our plan is, as you know, to have half of you for the first part of the semester, juniors and seniors the second half. We really want seniors to be able to have a graduation in person, if at all possible. The final question I'll deal with is, could this decision change? We have made our decisions based on the best evidence available at any point in time. And like you, we're watching carefully and with concern what's happening around the country, what's happening in our state. Today, as a matter of fact, new guidelines were put into place by our governor for testing and tracing and travel. So we will always be guided by health and safety and any regulations that we have to follow. But we're doing our very best. And looking at this team in front of me, they're working tirelessly to make sure we can bring students back in a safe way. So thanks again for being with us. I'm going to turn it over now to Don Dominici, who's going to handle your questions, particularly related to testing. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. We did receive quite a few questions about testing. A lot of families wanted to know, what type of test are we using? How will the test be administered? What's the process for signing up for tests, the scheduling? Can we test wastewater on campus? All very good questions. In addition to that, we received questions that were more general questions about requirements for next semester, beyond just testing, and I'll address some of those as well. And then finally, the other broad category of questions that I'll try to touch on were more about how do we follow up once somebody has tested positive, both the cases that we've had this semester and going forward. What is our quarantine and isolation process? So those are some big areas, and I'll try to hit on the high points. So the type of test we'll be using, President Ensign already said we will be sending the test to the Broad Institute. We're very happy to have that partnership. The test we will be administering is a PCR molecular test via an anterior nares nasal swab that will be self-collected. If anyone has seen the news story on Cornell University, there's a great example of a student going in and doing the self-collected test and handing over the sample. So that's an example of what it might look like. But we will have medical professionals that will be overseeing the testing, and they will get sent out to the Broad overnight, and they will have test results back in a timely manner. They're estimating about 24 hours of turnaround time from the time they receive it. So President Ensign also mentioned these tests will be happening for students twice a week. This will allow us to get fairly quick turnaround on tests and test multiple times a week to try to stay ahead of the virus. In addition, you've already been informed that we'll require testing prior to returning to campus as well. And more information on that will be forthcoming. That will be through a different vendor than we're using for our on-campus testing. There will be a process. There is an app that students and employees will be testing, some employees as well, depending on their on-campus work and how often they're on campus and interactions with students, things like that. There will be an app to sign up on, and you'll have a regular time where you would go in and do your test. The wastewater testing option, I'll briefly address that. That is something we explored, but given the logistics of our facilities, of our sewage facilities on campus, it wasn't a viable option for Dickinson. It wouldn't have given us useful information. A few other questions we receive are about, what will happen when students first get to campus. You've gotten some information, and there's more information in the FAQs, in addition to the email about restricted movement over the first 2 weeks of campus. There will be, students will be allowed to pick up food. Students will be allowed to spend time outside, spend time with their pod mates. We're taking a pod approach to housing. So the students that you'll be living in close contact with will be treat them like household members, so that you will be able to have some interaction with them as well. Face coverings are required. We had a few questions about face coverings, and there's an FAQ on our website explaining the requirements for what types of face coverings will be required for students who are on campus. In addition, our process for following up when we have a positive case, and what we've done this semester and what we will continue to do next semester, is that we have on-campus staff who follow up with whether it's an employee or a student who we become aware of a positive COVID case. We will follow up to find out if they have had any close contacts with other members of the Dickinson community. And then we will follow up with those close contacts and advise them accordingly. If it's a close contact of somebody who has tested positive for COVID, we will, for students, we will instruct on quarantine. The positive cases will be isolated in an individual room with a private bathroom. And students who were the close contacts, we would give instructions on quarantine. The colleges, our staff is following up with those students on a regular basis, making sure they have what they need in terms of food that needs to be delivered, other important items, to make sure that they're able to bring that into their space with them if they're being moved. In some cases, for students quarantining who have not tested positive, but are contacts, will be able to quarantine in place. But for students being moved, we'll make sure we have everything we need. All students are being followed up with by phone and by a daily questionnaire that we will send, and we have been sending, so that we are able to make sure that students have the support they need, and if there are worsening symptoms, that we'll be able to talk them through next steps if anything different needs to happen. Another question came through about what if you experience worsening symptoms and it's an evening or a weekend. Any student can call our Department of Public Safety, who can get in touch with our other staff members. And if immediate follow-up is needed, if there's a concern, we will have that student contacted and provide instruction on next steps to take. So we will be following this tracing process and the quarantine and isolation steps next semester, just like we're doing now. A few questions came through on flu vaccines, who's required. It's all students are required unless you have an exemption. There's information on our FAQ page about exemptions. One question came in about, if you're coming in March, do you still need one? Yes, we are asking all students to get those. Finally, I'll address a question about what are we doing to protect students that are going home. Any student who's on campus right now can request to be tested at the Wellness Center prior to going home to make sure that they're, at least at the time of testing, that they're not positive for COVID. Next semester, that process will be automated. We'll have our regular testing program in place, so that will extend through the end of the semester. So any students going home, when students leave campus, they will have had a recent test at that point as well. Some questions I see on the Q&A. More information will be put out about pods, but the size of the pods will vary, and it will really depend on the type of housing arrangement. I'm going to stop there so other people can have time to address other areas.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for your comments and for all of your good work during this period. Next up is George Stroud, our Vice President for Student Life and Dean of Students. George.
Sorry about that, I had to unmute myself, but thank you, Donna and Dr. Ensign. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us this evening. There were a number of questions that came in that directly relate to the student life on campus. Specifically, folks want to know housing, how's that going to work? Where are we going to live? How many people are we going to live with? There were other really important questions regarding student responsibility and how are we going to keep folks safe, and what are these agreements that folks are talking about? And so I just want to take a few minutes to address some of the questions and concerns. And I'm going to start with what seems to be the question that, or the area that we had the most questions about, which is housing, which is understandable. Last week, I believe it was last week, students should have received some instructions about how to apply for on-campus housing. And so let me just provide a few details about that. We did ask, and we are asking for anyone who wants to live on campus in the spring to provide us with that information by November 29th. Now, there are a number of folks who are saying, who are asking why so early? What if we want to change our mind? And we get that. We understand that there may be some decisions that students and their families may still need to make. And yes, while we would hope that when you petition that you would be ready to go, if you decide to change your mind at a later date, we understand that. However, this is a process in which it takes a lot of time for us to house students, to organize the residence halls, and to make sure that we communicate back to the students and the families as to where people are going to be. If folks have roommates, then they want to be able to communicate with their roommate. We also understand that people may be traveling from far distances, and so people need time to be able to make those plans. And so therefore, we had to set some deadlines, early deadlines, so that we could accommodate not only our internal process, but accommodate some of the needs of the families who will be traveling here in January. So for those of you, especially the first year students and families who are on the call, what I would urge you to do, if you have not done so, please go to the housing icon on the gateway. There you will look for the housing process. Click on that, and then over on the left-hand side, I believe it is, there will be a button for application, and then Spring 21 Plan. Once you go into, get into that package, there'll be a series of questions for you to answer that indicate what your plans are. Please provide as much information and as much detail as you can, because that will help us in our process moving forward. The goal is the week of December 18th. Residence Life will have collected all of that information. And for first year students, so I want to split this up. For our first year students, the week of December 18th, we anticipate that we will have your housing assignment to you during that week. Not only your housing assignment, but for those students who may want to have a roommate, also who your roommate is at that point in time. So you will have that information. That will be the week of December 14th. For our returning students, also during the week of the 14th, there have been a lot of questions about, will I be able to select my roommate? Will I be able to choose where I want to go? Your process, we are not, the college, we're not automatically assigning rooms to our returning students. What we are doing is that you will go into the lottery process that you are very familiar with. And so during the week of the 14th, that lottery process will be open to those students who are available. So you will be able to see where the room availability is, and be able to select who you want to live with if you choose to have a roommate, or be near folks, because there were a number of questions that said, if I didn't have a roommate or I no longer wanted my roommate, could I live near people? So we're giving you the opportunity to be able to pick and choose those types of environments that you would like. Don mentioned in his discussion about pods. We anticipate setting up pods throughout the campus. And what we mean by that is it's going to be configured based on housing. So where you live, the folks that you live with, and it will be different by building because each building is set up differently. If you're in a small house or apartment, that space will be your pod. If you're in one of our larger buildings, it may be a floor or a wing of a floor that becomes your pod. But what we want to set up is that these will be groups of individuals who you will engage with socially. There'll be some programming, hopefully go to engage in meals with, and do other activities within that group. So think of it kind of as a family or a household, and the activity. So it doesn't mean that you are only contained to that one group, but many of your activities will happen within that pod structure. So that's that information there. The other issues that came up was about the move-in schedule. And folks wanted to know, how is that going to work? When do I move in? So for first year students in January, move-in will be on January 20th and January 21st. So it'll be 2 days of move-in. So that is a Wednesday and a Thursday. For all other students, move-in will be January 22nd and January 23rd. Now, what's important to understand is that each of you, at a later date, after assignments have been given, you will have the opportunity to sign up for a day and time for move-in. It is important that once you sign up, that you arrive on campus at that day and given time, because we're trying to do a couple of things. One, we want to avoid a large number of people showing up on campus at the same exact time, which then does not account for social distancing. But two, Dawn spoke about the testing that will occur on campus. So arranging those days and times for move-in also accounts for the number of folks who will need to go and go through the testing protocol, so that we don't have large lines that are backing up there. So I would ask each of you to really be mindful of those time slots that you sign up for. It'll also be important for you to know that because of the procedures that we have set in place, accommodating early or late arrivals will be very difficult for us to do. Because again, folks will need to be tested before they are given access to the room. So if people arrive early or late, we may not be able to accommodate that. So please try to avoid that. And also, you will notice that the dates that I gave are a Wednesday through a Saturday. We recognize that classes begin on Monday, but we cannot accommodate a Sunday arrival because we don't have access to the testing on Sundays. And so therefore, it's a Wednesday through Saturday in which people will need to arrive on campus so that they can gain access into the buildings and have all of those services met there. The other question that we received is, well, I may need help moving in. And so can I have family members who come? And the answer is yes, but it will be limited. We are limiting each student to 2 family members or people to help them move in. Only 2. Again, same reason we understand that this may be a difficult decision for some families to make, especially our first year students with the excitement of going off to school. We really understand that. However, we need to keep some of these measures in place. And so limiting your support to 2 people, that is enough. That should be enough folks to help you get in. Also, we anticipate that we may have some assistance here on campus to help out. So we're still working through that as well. Off-campus housing. There were a number of questions that have come in about off-campus housing and is that permitted? The answer to that question is twofold. One, if your permanent residence is within 50 miles of the college or less, then yes, we are allowing you to live at home and to commute to campus, but that is your permanent place of residence. Those students who are thinking about purchasing or leasing property here in town, we do not want that to happen. Anyone who were to do that, you would not have access to the campus, any of the facilities at all. And a big reason for that is then you would not be a part of our testing protocols. And so therefore, we would not be able to account for you as far as whether or not you are positive or not as far as the COVID virus is concerned. And so the answer is no to off-campus housing other than commuter students, which are 50 miles or less. Other questions that came in really go to, what is life on campus going to look like? There's been talk about the campus compact that was sent out to each of you. Some of you, I just left a call with a number of students, and some folks have said to me that they received the compact, but they have not read it yet. I would urge each and every one of you to read through the campus compact, as well as the addendum, the COVID addendum to the community standards, which is about a 7-page document. What the campus compact is it's an agreement that we are creating between the college and the students that talks about, these are the expectations that we have of you and your behavior. There's not rocket science in there. These are simple measures, many of them regarding wearing a mask whenever you're not in your own room, or if you're in your room or place of residence with people who are outside of your pod. Things such as making sure that you don't engage in large gatherings that may be dangerous. Submitting to testing protocols and things of that nature. But these are all the things that we believe are necessary in order to try to keep this campus as safe as possible. And so we would urge each and every one of you to sit down, read through the protocols that are there, and to give some serious thoughts, because we've had some feedback from some students who said, you know, I'm not sure if these expectations are for me. And we understand that, right? But for those of you who feel that you can abide by these, please read it, sign it, and return it to us. What we will do is we're asking folks to sign that agreement now and send it in. And then when you arrive, we will hand it back out to you again, because we understand that people may have forgotten about the compact and what's in there. But we want families and students to have the opportunity to read through that information now and to make some really good decisions about what they're able to abide by when they come to campus. There will be, the other question is, well, what happens if people are not following the campus compact? And what we are saying is that If people show us that they refuse to abide by the rules and the responsibilities that have been set here, our responsibility is to keep this place safe. So for those folks who, for whatever reason, determine that they're not going to abide by it, the college's response will be to send those students home. We don't want to do that, but that will be the response because we need to keep this place safe. Moving forward, just to try to wrap this up, folks have asked about opportunities for engagement. We are setting up opportunities for students to be able to engage with each other here on campus. For those of you who are returning students, I want to just say this: campus life will be different. The life and how the students engaged pre-COVID, for this coming semester, it's not going to be the same. However, we do recognize that there's a need for students to become engaged with each other, and we're trying to create opportunities for small groups of students to be able to engage with each other throughout. So there will be more information that will be forthcoming there. And lastly, actually, two more points. There was a question about, can students have guests in their room? And the answer is yes, you are allowed to have guests who are a part of the Dickinson community in your room. Now, what we are saying is that we're saying double the occupancy is what is allowed in the room. So if you're in a room with the occupancy is a single, then you're allowed to have another person in there. If it's a double room, then you can have up to 2 other people, so a total of 4 people in the room. And so that's how we're looking at that, to try to create opportunities for people to have folks over. So that's it. However, guests from outside of the campus community is a no. We are not allowing that to happen. Again, when you look at the testing measures that we're putting in place, we want to make sure that anyone who comes into the campus has been tested and is safe to move about. Lastly, there were questions about the leave of absence process. We understand that there are those of you who are really grappling with, can you come back to campus right now? We understand that. If you have made a decision that you don't want to return for the spring semester, there is a leave of absence process that you can go through. I would urge each and every one of you to contact Angie Harris, who's the Associate Vice President for Student Life, and she is in charge of that leave of absence process. She can walk you through the details of that. Angie's email is harrisa@dickinson.edu. Thank you.
George, thanks so much for those great comments and your good work. There are so many questions related to housing. Maybe you could just take a few that I think can be answered fairly quickly. If students were assigned their dorm, do they have to reapply? There's a number related to that. If a student has a housing accommodation, will that still be honored? So why don't you go ahead and take those 2 at least?
Okay, so yes, there were every student actually was provided a housing assignment for this current semester, and those stayed valid. And part of that was we were trying to create community for folks there. However, we are going into a new process here, and so everyone will need to go through that lottery process. The returning students will go through that lottery process, and we'll have the opportunity to pick a new space right now. And the reality is, one of the reasons why we have to do some shuffling around is we had to take some rooms offline in order to account for quarantine and isolation space. So all of the spaces that were assigned previously are no longer available. So therefore, there is a need to go through this new process. That doesn't mean that people may not still be able to pick the same spot that they had previously, but it is a new process.
Thanks, George. And for all these additional questions, we will, if we have your name and email, we'll get back to you individually. Otherwise, we'll gather them and, as I've said, answer, and they'll be in our FAQs in a day or two, because there are many, many coming in. George made a really important point about the need for having rooms for quarantine. And one of you asked early on in the chat, the why. Why did we make the decision not to bring everyone back? Because others have been able to do it. First of all, it's really important that everyone understand this is a localized decision. Without national guidelines, each college and university has been on their own making these decisions and making sure we are following the regulations and setting in place the testing and tracing structure to make sure you're safe. We simply would not have enough rooms for quarantining and isolation if we had all students back at the same time. We've watched our fellow colleges who did bring all of their students back, or most of their students back. And I don't know of a one who's been able to have the quarantine rooms on campus if they brought back those numbers. That's really important to us, to make sure if someone did get ill, they would be on the campus and we could take care of them. So that's a short answer to a very complex question. So thank you. Provost Weissman, we'll turn to you next.
Thank you, Margie. I want to talk about the academic program, and it's also a complex thing, but I'll try to generalize and answer some of the more salient questions. Basically, in terms of instruction, we'll have two modes in the spring. One of them will be remote. There will still be classes that are remote, and the other will be hybrid, and that would be a mix of students who are in person and students who are away. In terms of the remote, it's the reason for that is chiefly that we are not forcing faculty back into the classroom, and there are a number who have health conditions, elder care concerns, child care concerns that have prompted them to opt to continue to do classes remotely. There are a small number who actually think that they can do better with the remote instruction than with hybrid, rather in-person instruction under conditions of pandemic. Because remember, in-person instruction, the classroom there will be social distancing, people will be wearing masks, the faculty member will be at a distance from the students, and so it's going to be different than the normal in-person experience. So we will have a significant component of remote. And I should say that in respecting faculty's right to make a choice about this, it's parallel to our decision to make you students, or give you students, the choice to stay remote if you wish. Students who are studying remotely will have access to all courses without exception. And although this applies mostly to seniors, but if there are seniors or others who have to have courses for very strong reasons, we'll make sure that they get them. In the case of seniors, we're going to make sure everyone completes their program and are able to graduate on time. The other mode of instruction will be hybrid, a mix. And that's almost inevitable because in the first half of the semester, when first years and sophomores, you folk are back on campus, there will be juniors and seniors who are going to be in many of your classes. And then it will be the reverse circumstance in the second half of the semester. Plus, there will be students who are coming in remotely during the entire semester because they've chosen not to be on campus. When we decided that we would go entirely remote last summer, we did it fairly early for safety and health reasons. But it was a big plus academically, because what it meant was our faculty could concentrate on a fairly intensive program over the summer. They set aside all of their own work in order to do this, to prepare for remote instruction. And I would say that the feedback that we've gotten from faculty, from a significant number of students, and we'll know more because we are doing student evaluations this semester, but the feedback has been very positive, actually, that people have had relatively good experience and that they've learned a good deal. And I think that's because we had time to prepare. We're in a similar situation now because we're adding hybrid. Faculty have already done remote and learned some lessons. I'll say a bit about that in a minute from the remote experience, but they'll have time to work out how they're going to do hybrid instruction. And there are going to be multiple paths chosen by individual faculty. Some of them, many of them will have classes, and they'll all have classrooms are equipped with cameras and mics, where they'll be doing some classes with both the students who are in person and students who are Zooming in or teaming in from the outside. And they'll both be there. whether we might have student TAs available to manage the chat and Q&A for students who are away is an open question, but that's a possibility. Some faculty will double teach. In other words, they may do a couple of classes that are hybrid, mixed in the way that I described, and then maybe once a week have separate discussion sessions for those who are present and those who are away. Even for those who are present here on campus, it needs to be noted that there may be some classes where the enrollments are so large that we can't fit everybody into a socially distanced classroom at the same time. So, you know, a classroom that normally could hold 35 or 25 students is going to be down to 10 to 12 or 14. So there may be some rotating through in which students have some of the work in person part of the week and some of the work then remotely as well. So it's going to be a mix. You know, as I said, faculty will have time to work through all of this, and they will have learned some lessons from the fall. Now, I feel that what I said about the fall experience being a positive one and better than we had anticipated, it doesn't mean it was perfect by any means. Now, I've gotten very few complaints, to tell you the truth. I expected a lot more. And you know, if you have concerns, be in touch. I'm not encouraging you to complain if you don't have complaints, of course. But those who came in, almost all of them were about one thing, and that was workload. And whether or not students, you know, were just overtaxed with the work that had been assigned. In fact, a couple of people, well, yeah, a couple, said, you know, do faculty, are they thinking that since students are at home with not much else to do, that they can up the workload? And I can guarantee you that is not the case. No faculty are thinking that way at all. But it is difficult when you're doing remote the first time through, and it'll be the same in the spring with hybrid. It's difficult to judge what is the right amount of work to assign because students will be doing it. And faculty, by the way, will be assessing it and delivering it in ways that they haven't in the past. So, you know, there's one guideline is that when you go to remote instruction as a faculty member with a course that's in person, you probably ought to aim for maybe 80% of the material that you would otherwise cover. Whether or not that fits particular courses is an open question, but faculty know that workload has been an issue. I will tell you, workload has been an issue for them too. They are deeply dedicated to making this work. I mean, they are profoundly into it. And as a result, by the end of the semester, like many of you students, they're exhausted from it too. And so they do appreciate workload issues. They will learn from last semester. And you know, I think that we'll be able to provide a very good experience. So our challenge is to kind of balance, on the one hand, safety. We have to make this safe. And that's why we're doing half of the student body at a time. It's why classrooms are going to be socially distanced and with masks. That's important to us. At the same time, we want to provide as much of a direct, traditional Dickinson in-person experience as possible. Remotely, that will mean Zoom dimensions of courses where faculty are dealing directly with you. Might be in a discussion group, might be through a lecture, although a lot of those are now being taped and put up asynchronously. It might be through office hours. And the same will be true on campus. We want you in classrooms, working with faculty directly as much as possible, but there will be some times that it's going to be remote. Faculty will try to adjust to that, perhaps by doing in-person one-on-one meetings for advising in socially distanced spaces. And of course, as the weather improves, the possibility of doing that outside expands. So we're going to do our best to balance, as I said, health and safety with providing you with a direct and really meaningful academic experience. One piece of all of that, excuse me, is having all of the supports that are traditionally available to students still available. On campus, for example, we've gotten a couple of questions. The library will be open. Its capacity will be reduced because we're going to socially distance in the library. So half of the furniture is being moved to provide space between students when they go in there. We're not nailing the furniture to the floor, but we're trusting that you'll use good judgment in terms of spacing. And we'll be looking for other ways on campus to have space available for students who are doing remote work, not to always have to do it in your room, which would be, a very limiting experience, and we understand that. In terms of other supports, the Writing Center, the QR Center, the Access and Disability Services folk advising, the Career Center, Internship Office, all of those will be available. They'll be available both in person for students who are on campus and also by remote distance for students who are not on campus. So you can count on all of that being available to you. One last thing that I want to cover is study abroad. We are not able to run our study abroad programs in the spring in the usual way, which is really heartbreaking for all of us. We know it's an important dimension of the Dickinson experience. Although as first years and sophomores, you can look forward to opportunities as you get farther along. But we are offering a series of courses, and they're available on the CGSE, that's the Center for Global Study and Engagement website. I think if you go to the FAQ, there's a link there too. But we'll be offering some courses that will actually finish with a 3-week session abroad in the summer, assuming that by then we'll be able to do it. So those will be at our centers abroad, and it'll give all students, including first years and sophomores, though priority will go to juniors since they're the ones who have missed out most this year, but there will be access to others, we think. So if you're interested in an early abroad experience, you can take a look at that. And then we'll have increased capacity in the fall for sophomores. So don't worry that if we're up and running with our programs in the fall, and we are optimistic that we will be, that somehow, a backlog of juniors or even seniors is going to prevent you from having experience, because we're working very hard for that not to happen. So with that, I'm going to stop. And
thanks, Neil. Thanks very much. Before I move on to Bronte, I think you can help clarify a few things. You said the library will be open, and I want to clarify, yes, the writing lab will also be open. Neil, there's many questions about the assignment of classes and how remote students participate. And I think this one question maybe captures many. If faculty choose to conduct only live hybrid classes simultaneously with remote and in-person students, how will remote students be able to participate in classroom discussions?
Right, and if that gets to what is really the big challenge with hybrid classes. The term is modality bias, meaning, delivering the same experience to students who are in person and to students who are coming in remotely. We expect that students who are coming in remotely will be able to participate in class discussion. They'll do it through, the raised hand, chat, Q&A functions. We're going to have to work to make sure that faculty are able simultaneously to hear questions and see in front of them comments from students who are in class with those who are remote. As I said, one possibility is assigning essentially a teaching assistant students whose job is to monitor the chat and make sure that the questions are attended to. Other faculty insist that they can do this. I have to admit that I'm looking at the chat right now and trying to simultaneously speak to all of you and be attentive to the chat. There are 61 chat questions, so I'm not getting them all. But it is feasible to do that. So that's what they're going to be working on. If it doesn't work for them, if they don't think it's viable, then what they'll do is they'll opt for providing an in-class session and a parallel remote session. So the intent is to do away with the modality bias and make the experience even for both sides. The one advantage that we have, well, there are two advantages. One is a faculty, particularly for sophomores, but this will happen fast for first years too. Our faculty get to know their students. Our classes are remarkably small, even by comparison with other liberal arts colleges, and they'll get to know you quickly. And I think have a sense of what works for you and what does not. And because you're in limited numbers, they'll also be able to reach out to you individually when that's necessary. They know that it's going to take more work to make this happen in the right kind of way. As I said, I think earlier, they put aside all of their scholarship and research, knowing full well that that's going to have to be paused while we do this. And so, I'm optimistic that students who are coming in remotely will get to a hybrid class will get a good experience. I'm very optimistic that students who stay entirely remotely or who are here and have a course or two that are remote will have a good experience, because that's what we're pretty sure happened in the fall.
Thanks so much, Neil. I think we better stop you there because you're losing your voice. There are many questions, as we've said in the chat. We will try to address some of them before we wrap up. Just very quickly, yes, the Writing Center and the QR Center will have actual people there. And so there will be in-person support. But I'm going to now turn it over to Bronte Burley-Jones for her presentation, and then we'll answer other questions as we can. Thanks, Bronte.
Hey, Margie. My questions, or the questions for our area, were broken down into 3 primary categories: student billing, cleaning protocols, and dining hall. So let me start with student billing. Room and board will be prorated, and we've actually posted that information on the website. The spring semester bills will be available in early January. Students can actually log into the Dickinson Gateway and access their bills through the e-billing channel. The due date for spring semester bills will be January 22nd. There were questions about the refund policy. Our refund policy will stay in existence the way it currently reads. The difference will be that the period that we're assessing it against will be the beginning and end dates for your 7-week stay on campus, but the policy and the percentages will stay applicable. Now, transitioning into our cleaning protocols. We actually spent a considerable amount of time over the summer writing a very extensive set of cleaning protocols. And so you'll be happy to know that all of our products and procedures meet the CDC COVID recommendations. All of our housekeepers have been trained on these protocols, and we have all of the proper PPE in place. Specifically, our larger residential buildings will be cleaned Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. Questions, very specific questions about restrooms. They'll be cleaned twice a day. And that's going to include the sinks, the handles, the drains, the countertops, the floors. Trash will be removed during those 2 cleanings. Toilet paper and soap will be refilled during those 2 trips to clean the areas. The showers will be scrubbed twice a week. Very extensive scrubbing procedures. We've identified the appropriate cleaning materials, and the debris and drains will be cleaned as part of that process. Paper towels and soap dispensers have been installed in all of the restrooms across campus, and we have disconnected all of the electric hand dryers. We've also put disinfecting wipes in all of the restrooms, and there are now hand sanitizer machines or dispensers in all of our entryways to our buildings. Our housekeepers are currently going through our buildings now to prepare the campus for your arrival. They're doing extensive cleaning in all of the common areas, and we've actually secured a large number of Clorox 360 disinfecting sprayers, which allow us to clean a space and clear it of 99.9% of the bacteria within 5 seconds. So we purchased additional machines during the summer, and we've been using them. The thing I think is important also to note is that our responsibility to be safe and to practice appropriate behavior is incumbent upon all of us. So there will be a supply of disinfecting wipes throughout the campus, in common spaces, in restrooms, in classrooms, and we'll be asking everyone to participate in wiping down spaces once they've left those areas, to include desks, countertops, and computers. So transitioning into the dining hall. There are questions about whether there will be refrigerator microwave combos available. We've set aside 50 of those for our isolation and quarantine buildings, or rooms rather, and another 95 will be available for rental during the semester. And you can actually rent those through the bookstore as is our typical procedure. Lots of questions about the meal plan. So a meal plan is required for all residential students, which has always been the case. We have, however, developed a new COVID meal plan in recognition of some adjustments that we needed to make. So we will be offering one meal plan during the spring semester, and it's a 20 meal per week plan. I appreciate that there was a question about if there are 7 days a week, how do you get to 20 meals? Well, we have 3 meals a day, Sunday through Saturday. On Sunday, we have a lunch and dinner. So 6 days a week, we've got 3 meals, and on Sunday, you have 2 meals, i.e. the 20 meals. We're not offering an apartment flex plan this semester because we really want to limit off-campus foot traffic. That's best for the students on campus, but also the members of our local community. I do want to point out that the COVID plan that we've put in place is significantly discounted from all of our meal plan offerings. And we've done that in recognition of the fact that several of our retail locations will not be in play. We're not offering all of the full suite of meal plan options, and our service hours will be restricted. So again, if you were to compare the meal plan charge for the spring semester to our typical charges, you will note that there's been a significant discount put into play here. Lots of questions about our food safety protocols. So I want to be clear that we're exercising all of the appropriate social distancing. We're using the appropriate PPE in the dining hall. There will be no self-serve during the spring semester. The staff will serve all of the meal preparations. The staff will be, again, using all of the appropriate PPE, and they will clean and sanitize the area in between each meal offering. And that will include using the Clorox 360 machines that I just spoke of. A really important factor to note is that the dining locations are going to be restricted to only those holders of meal plans. So our commuter students, faculty and staff will not be allowed in the dining hall. It is restricted and only for the use of our students on the meal plan. Others can go to our grab and go locations. So there will be 3 grab and go locations, one in the Hub Underground, one in the Klein Annex, and another at the Rector Science Complex. So grab and go will be in play for the first 2 weeks when we're on restricted movement. And so you can pick up those meals in the dining hall or Union Station. After the first 2 weeks, the dining hall and Union Station will be open for sit-down meals. In Union Station, you can grab and go, or you can choose to stay. As I've said, we've got 3 grab and go locations. All of your meal opportunities and your favorites will be available in the dining hall. So what you're used to getting from the Cove or from the grill, the hot entree line, all of those things will be available in the dining hall. Want to note that Union Station will be open until 10 p.m. With extended hours, and it will also be open during the times that the dining hall is closed. So there will be an opportunity for meals throughout the day with the grill and deli options all available to you. And so I think, Margie, in 4 minutes, I've covered the questions that I was attempting to
I think
to
yours
address.
was the most efficient. Bronte, thanks for your great comments and your outstanding work. We're just about out of time. I promise we will answer all these questions. I'll just answer a few very quickly. Number one, when the vaccines are available, will we participate in the distribution of them? We sure hope so. It's early. While we are watching this and we are in conversations with folks about it, we simply do not know yet, as the country doesn't, how the distribution, both in terms of priorities, who will be getting it first, although we know our healthcare providers will get it first, and then how they will do it. There's a lot of discussion about using schools and colleges, as I understand we did during the polio era, and that's how vaccines were distributed. So we'll keep you posted on that. Lots of questions about athletics. The Centennial Conference presidents will be making the decisions in December. We have met many times during this semester to discuss possibilities. Will practices be allowed? As far as I understand at this point, yes, if there is not competition, practices would be allowed. And I think we're just about out of time. So I thank you for being with us. There are many questions that have not been answered. I see that 57 were answered thanks to my staff. About 55 have not been. We will get to all your questions. We will either answer you individually if we can, but there are many that came in anonymously. So obviously we can't answer those, but they will be in our FAQs. I thank you so much for being with us tonight, for being strong Dickinsonians. Please stay safe and stay well, and know this team in front of you is working tirelessly to make sure this world-class Dickinson education is available to you. So thank you so much for being with us. Good night.